It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the USA figure skater Jessica Gaudy. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get into the sport of figure skating?
Yeah, actually, it was something that I was both sort of born into, but also originally didn't think I would do in a competitive level. Both of my parents were competitive artistic roller skaters at the national level, and they skated up to like they became national champions in the domestic senior dance event, and then they retired and became coaches and had a decade or more long career of coaching national and world medalists. And then in the late 80s, they retired from coaching and they were living in like the Northeast, New York, Delaware, New Jersey. They came down to Florida to buy a skating rink. And a few years later, I was born. So at the time, they weren't really coaching. We had a competitive club that another coach was the main coach, and my parents just ran the rink for the recreational part. But at one point in when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, some former students of my parents came and asked if they would work with them, and they were a world-class dance team. So my parents got back into it for them, and when I was very young, I was going to world championships with my parents and with this team. And so I went to a few different countries. And by the time, after a few years, they eventually retired. And it was around that time that for the first time, I really thought, oh, okay, I think I want to do this too. Up till that point, I didn't really have a lot of interest. I think going with them and seeing everything over the years kind of got me into it.
How was that like, obviously growing up in a family that it has dancers, and then obviously one day you became a figure skater yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in reality it was a pretty natural thing. I mean, it's not uncommon in our sport to see a lot of people who are the children of coaches eventually become competitive themselves. I was maybe a little bit different because a lot of them they'll get started off at like 3 years old. I mean, of course, I had skates on my feet from the time I could walk, but my parents never tried to put me into competitions. I would always kind of think, oh, I want to do it, and then get bored or whatever. And it wasn't until later, like I said, I was a little bit older, and I kind of made the decision for myself. Where I guess other like coaches' kids, sometimes it's kind of they're put into it by default. And then, I mean, either way, when you get older, you have to decide that it's something you want to do or don't want to do. But I guess I was a little bit of a late starter by those standards.
What was it like being a part of the club Space Coast Skating Club?
So at the time when I was growing up, our competitive club, we had another coach. His name was Tony Berger, and he was the head coach, and he was always around in the rink from the time I was born. He was almost like a second father figure to me at the time, and I would take some little lessons from him when I was really young, even before I was competing. But then by the time I decided to compete, there were already all these other competitive skaters in the club, and there were a lot around my age or a couple years older. And so we had it was a great environment to try to learn, because there were a lot of skaters, like I said, within my age range, but a little higher level than me. And so it was really good for motivation to push me to become better. And also, it was sort of the first environment where I felt like I had a real group of friends. I was always a little more of the shy, introverted type, and I was an only child, so I didn't necessarily know how to get along with my peers very well, and I had some troubles with that in school. I kind of focused on my grades, and I had one or two close friends, but I wasn't very good at making friends. And having that club experience, and I was around 11 or 12 when I first started with the club, that was sort of the first time that I was able to kind of open up and learn how to interact with other people close to my age. And felt like I had that camaraderie of a club or of a group of friends, because when you're in the skating club and you go, when you go to a competition together, a lot of times you're going to meals together, you're sitting in the same place at the competition, you're probably staying at the same hotel. So there's a lot of friendship there. And unfortunately now, the person who's head coach at the time, I mean, it's very good for him. He's left. He owns another rink now and is extremely successful. But we don't really have too much of a competitive club now. It's really myself and one other skater. So it's not that same level. It's not that same camaraderie and self motivation that you have when you have a club full of skaters. I was really grateful that in my formative years I had that kind of environment to push me forward.
In 2001, what was it like getting into competitive figure skating and competing competitively?
So at the time, that was my first year that I started. And I knew that, okay, I want to get into this. I want to do it. And I always kind of had on my mind, well, I liked the traveling to compete at the world level. So I always kind of had that in my sights. At the time when I started, I didn't really have an understanding yet of how to really the kind of hard work and dedication it took to do something at a high level, especially in an athletic sense. Like I said before, I was always kind of an academic type. School generally came easily to me, and I did a bunch of like sports and activities growing up. Like I did a little bit of ballet, I did a little bit of gymnastics, I did rec league basketball for several years. I even did like soccer for a semester. I kind of showed up and did the minimum and left. I was never a naturally academic or naturally athletic person. And so getting into that, I would say almost even the first year that I tried to compete in skating, I just knew, okay, I'm comfortable on skates. I've been on skates my whole life. So I kind of expected it to be easy, I guess. And after that first year, though, things went okay, but I was like, oh, I'm not having a lot of success. And, my parents like, well, we're trying to tell you, you actually have to work hard. So the second year, 2002, was the first year I qualified for nationals, and I finally had like a specific goal in mind. I was in a particular division, and I said, okay, my goal is I want to win, and I want to do whatever I need to do to improve to get there. And so I worked on it, and I skated my first nationals, and I skated two events, but the event I cared about the most was my dance event, and I did win my dance event. And so that kind of set me off. And now I understood, okay, that you finally make the connection. Okay, I worked hard and I got results. And so that is when I'd say I really started my competitive career, because like I actually had a plan, and I had a sense of, okay, hard work is the key to success.
What was it like making the World Championship Juniors from 2006 to 2008?
That was a really cool experience. I qualified with my partner at the time, Joey Rodriguez. We had been skating dance together since 2003. So we had a few years in the division just under junior at the time, which was freshman was the name. And so we had those formative years together, and we kind of knew that our goal was to make it to Worlds. And of course, we would hope that we could win. It was interesting for me personally because I had been to many world competitions, not as a skater, as a spectator. I had gone when my parents had coached that team when I was growing up. Then a few years later, after I started skating, I did go to two other world championships. There was one the 2 years before, there was one in the United States, and then there was one in Rome, Italy. The one in the United States was in Fresno, California. I went to those because we had club members that qualified in junior. We wanted to watch them. So by the time I actually qualified, it was a cool experience, because it was like, okay, this is what we've been working for these years. At the same time, it felt, I guess, where other skaters might feel nervous or unfamiliar, it did feel strangely kind of familiar to do that traveling, because I guess I had done it before. And so that part of it felt pretty comfortable. And it might have helped us skate well. I think that we were comfortable, we were confident, we had a lot going for us. Unfortunately, after 2008 was our last year in the junior division, and then after that, my partner had a wrist injury that was sustained a few times, and ultimately had to retire from skating for good. And so for the next several years, I was only skating solo dance, which was actually an event that, for instance, ice skating has it at sort of a local level, but it's not, or a national level, but it's not like one of their events that goes to Worlds, goes to the Olympics. For roller skating, we added it in 2007. It was the first year that solo dance was added. But at the time, you couldn't do, if you already skated a couples dance with a partner, you weren't allowed to also do the solo dance event. And that lasted until I think 2011. But then when my partner got hurt and had to quit, if I wanted to keep skating, so I shifted over into the solo events.
How was that transition like to go from the partner to the solo events and compete in the Pan American Games in 2011?
It was a very interesting adjustment for me because I had skated solo dance going up, but what we had domestically at the time was essentially a compulsory dance only event. Compulsory dance, if you ever watched ice skating or roller skating, is the same way. We have a set pattern dance to set music with set steps. Everybody does the same steps. That was the type of dance in the United States. That's the type of dance skating we basically exclusively did going up until we had these world qualifying solo dance events, which added a free dance, which is more, it's open choreography. There's certain like footwork requirements, and at the time there was a single revolution jump and a low level spin, almost sort of free skating elements. And I had never done free skating. I had never done any jumping and spinning really. And so I had done free dance, but only with a partner. And so it was quite the adjustment. Actually, the first year I did it, what my partner had gotten hurt right in the middle of the year. It was only maybe a month before regionals. So I had to pivot pretty quickly and switch over. Learning the dances for the solo event wasn't too bad, but then had to put together a free dance. And so what we did at the time, worked really hard in that amount of time. The first year, 2009, I qualified for Worlds. And after the compulsory portion of the event at Worlds, I went in with no expectations, but I was holding first, which was really exciting. But then my lack of experience in skating free dance type of skating by myself kind of came back to bite me. I moved down to fourth after the free dance. And so it was kind of disappointing having that experience, feeling like you're so close to that senior medal and then missing it. But honestly, I think if I had had success that year as far as getting a medal, I may have decided I was done. I'm not sure. And from there, sort of that disappointment, it kind of motivated me over the next few years to learn how to be better and to keep trying. I mean, it's been a long time since then and I'm still there. But going to the main question about 2011, that was sort of a different experience at the time. It was the first time I skated an international competition that wasn't the World Championships. So it was different because it was in the middle of the year. The rules at the time were a little bit strange because they mixed junior and senior together. They just had one event. And so we still had the compulsory dances at that time. So we had to do the junior compulsory dances. I believe it was from the previous year, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so it was doing different requirements, and then I did my previous year's free dance at the time, and it was interesting. And at those competitions at the time, if you went to an international competition, even if it was Worlds, but I think especially if it wasn't Worlds and it wasn't as organized, there were always these factors like, what are the conditions of the floor going to be? Is the building like something common that would happen during like sort of the hot months would be, is it raining in that location? Is the roof leaking? Is there a problem? Is that going to cause a leak on the floor? I think we had a couple of power outages at that competition. So it was a good exercise in having to be adaptable and having to deal with whatever's thrown at you, because a lot of times you go to competitions in places that you're not familiar with, and it's what you have to do. And so the best skaters, the most successful skaters, will be able to deal with that the best. It did give me my first international medals at the senior level. I believe I was second in the compulsory portion, fifth in the free dance portion, and got a third overall. At that competition they had a separate compulsory dance medal, free dance medal, and then a combined medal. So I went away with with 2 medals from that, which was kind of neat from a very maybe chaotic but fun experience.
What was that feeling like receiving the medals and having them put around your neck?
It's interesting to say, like, it depends on the competition, but like at the international competitions, there's a sense of importance, or whether it's the music that they play, or they always have, for instance, at the Pan American Championships, they had officials from the different organizations. Sometimes they'll have an official, like a mayor or something from the host town will be there sometimes. And I think I had the president of the international organization at the time, I think may have been the one who presented my medal, and he had done that at the World Championships too when I was junior. I don't know, I always find it interesting. They bring the officials out, they bring the audience out. But one thing I do find funny is, maybe we can talk to this later, because I had a competition this year, a World Cup competition, where I got a medal, and it had been the first time in a long time at a big international competition that I'd had that experience. So it's fresh in my mind that you train so long, you train for a year, or sometimes you train for many, many years. And one of your goals is to have that experience of being on the podium and experiencing the awards ceremony. When it finally happens, it's great, but it happens so fast compared to all the years and all the months and all the time of training, that it feels like it's such a fleeting moment, and then it's kind of gone. So if you wish you could kind of savor it more. One of the things I've had to learn over time, and I guess it's easy to learn this by force, on more so on the years when you don't have success, but even when you do have success, it teaches you that you really, as much as anybody who says they don't care if they win, or they don't care if they get a medal, I think is not being completely honest. I think we all do competitive sports versus recreational sports because at some level we would like to have that success. But at the same time, you can't have that be your only motivation, because that feeling when you're successful is very fleeting. You have so many more moments where you're in training, where you're in competition, where and you have to enjoy that process. You have to, in my case, skate for your own improvement, for your own satisfaction.
What is it like getting to meet your fans and having them ask for your autographs and photos?
It's interesting because the amount of people that you meet, it kind of depends on the location. There are some competitions we go to. Well, let's say at the regional and national level, for the most part, a lot of the people there are also skaters. And of course, there are a lot of times, like maybe the newer skaters that kind of know who's maybe winning in the higher level divisions, and their coaches point them out. So there will be some that'll like ask for photos, but a lot of the times we're kind of there with a lot of the same people that we know year after year. And it's kind of this it's like an event among us with not as many spectators. And some of the world championships, it depends on which location, but certain places, like in 2019, we had Worlds in Barcelona, Spain. I've been to Spain for Worlds 3 times in 3 separate locations. Each time they seem to have many spectators. There are some countries like Spain where roller skating is a pretty big and pretty well-known sport. There a lot of times in countries like that is where you'll see a lot of spectators, and then there will be little kids or even like teenagers that they'll come over to all the athletes and they'll ask you to sign something, either that they have a shirt that they're having everybody sign, or a little autograph book or something. And that's kind of a cool experience. Like, you get that little moment of feeling like important, I guess, in a way. Just that little like, oh, really, you want my autograph? Okay, like I'm just me. But it's kind of cool. It gives you this idea of you're doing something. It's easy to forget when you're just in the world of skating and you're in your own world, and you're always focused on being the best you can be, and not just being pretty good, but being great and trying to be the best in terms of your quality and your skating ability. It's easy to forget sometimes that for people who are not part of that world, or even for people who are just starting out in that world, everybody who reaches this level is impressive compared to what you do as a beginner, or what someone who can't skate, can do. We've all kind of achieved this level that only a very few people in the entire world have put the time and effort into doing. And so it is cool to get that sort of view from the outside rather than just being kind of stuck in your bubble.
Who are some of the most influential people in your career that have shaped you into the figure skater that you are?
There have been a lot over the years. First and foremost, of course, my parents are Joe and Marie Gaudy, and they, of course, were the reason I was introduced to sport in the first place, that I was around skates, and they were my first coaches. Just my mom coaches me now, but both of them have had incredible influence on me. The coach, Tony Berger, who was the main coach in our club when I was growing up, and like I said, we still my family still has a close relationship with him to this day. Those were my earliest influences. And then as skaters, the skaters that my parents were coaching when I was very young, Jeff Clement and Harriet Graham are their names, and they were the first competitive skaters and the first high-level competitive skaters, certainly, that I really watched. And so when it comes to being a skater, they were my first and some of my greatest influences. And then I have a few more over the years. My first nationals, one of the higher level events was skating, and my mom pointed out on the floor, like, see that girl skating? I want you to skate just like her. And her name was Heather Menard, and she, for many of the next several years, I would study videos of her skating all the time, and I kind of took literally, I want to skate just like her. And after a couple of years, I got to meet her. And sometimes they say don't meet your heroes, but Heather was so nice, like everything that you would want, someone that you look up to be. Really sweet. And one of the best parts about that is the first year I qualified for Worlds in the senior division. When you go to Worlds, you choose a roommate because they have to put the athletes together. I was going to ask Heather if she would be my roommate, and she actually asked me first, and it just felt really cool to have that experience. So we were able to become friends. Yeah, so that was a great experience. She was a big influence on me. And then there are many others that I can put as well, like many others over the years. But then the last one that I absolutely have to name is Sandro Guerra, who in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, he was a skater from Italy who was very high level in free skating and circle figures. He became a very prolific choreographer, I believe, probably the best choreographer in our sport. He did the choreography during the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, I want to say. Italy started becoming one of the dominant countries in skating as far as the overall quality and skating ability and number of good skaters. And a lot of the world champions that had the best programs, Sandro was the one that did their choreography. And so I had always wanted to learn from him because I just thought that he always stood out. His programs always stood out as something different from what you would normally see. And finally, at the end of 2012, I was able to take a trip to train with him, and he did a program for me. And that was the beginning of every year since then. I've either trained with him once to twice a year, or like even the last year, I think because of COVID, I wasn't able to go over and get new programs done from him, but I still worked in coordination with him. And I'm actually next month planning to go train with him again, if possible. And he's been a great influence. I would say that if you take my skating career in stages, I have my progress leading up to that point before I started working with Sandro. And then once I started working with him is sort of the next era in my skating, where I got to learn from a different perspective, a perspective outside of the United States and a perspective outside of just dance skating, because he had the perspective of a free skater. So it was more he was able to give me some insight into a lot of the skating ability that I lacked from not having a background in free skating. And then in addition, he outside the rink, he made a great friend and a great mentor. And he likes to talk about sort of the psychology of skating, trying to come to come to terms in your life outside of skating and in order to help you with skating. And a lot of the talk about making sure that you're skating for yourself and not for the result comes from a lot of what he taught me. And so, I mean, I could go on and on about ways that he's been inspiration for me. But anyway, those probably the short list of, and there are many more people who have been influenced over time, but I think those are certainly the biggest ones.
What are some of your future plans in the sport of figure skating?
So I've been in the sport for a very long time. There's always the question of like, how will you know that you've done enough as far as on the competitive side? Because it's definitely a lot to do, lots of work and lots of putting your body through a lot. In dance, it's not quite as intense. Like say free skating, you're landing on the jumps all the time. You're positioning your body on the spins. There's a lot more possibility for injury. And I think in general, people do it for fewer years, or maybe are able to do it for fewer years because of that greater toll on the body. Dance skating, you can make it for longer if you keep yourself in shape. But I've always kind of said I really don't know when I would feel like stopping, but the general thing I use is when I don't think I can improve anymore. I feel like I've made a lot of big improvements, but I can tell that there's a lot more I can still do to improve. And so until don't think I can anymore, I'm going to keep working on improving and seeing how good I can get. Of course, I would love to get a medal at Worlds in the senior level in my event. I do probably have one of the most difficult events to do that in. Just I mentioned before, just the sheer level of skating. There are so many good skaters that sometimes it seems like you never know necessarily who's going to be the best because there's so many good ones. Like any given year, you don't know who will necessarily end up on top. So that is a goal I would like to achieve. But even if I don't achieve that goal, I would like to have the satisfaction of knowing that I became as good as I could. Whenever I'm done competing, I would like to continue my career as a judge. Right now, I'm a national level judge, or I've been a national level judge now for 2 years. So I'm just kind of getting started with that. But my ultimate goal is to become an international judge and a technical specialist for dance. And so the technical specialist is the one who will, when evaluating a program, will call the technical levels of the technical requirements being presented. And so just to give a quick summary of how our judging system works, it's fairly new for us, but ICE has done a similar system for many, many years now, where you have a technical panel that evaluates the technical content of the program. And then you have the judges panel will evaluate more of your overall skating ability and presentation in your program. And then also assign a quality bonus, or I guess penalty, if you want to call it that. It'll add or subtract points to or from your technical score. But anyway, my goal, I would like to be an international technical specialist for dance.
Of course, what advice would you give those people that are looking to get into the sport of figure skating?
I would say that it's a great experience. And first of all, I think for someone who's very young, getting involved in any sport is great because you learn a lot of values. I mean, you learn the value of teamwork, especially in team sports, of course, but even if you are in an individual sport, but you're in a club with a group of people, there's an aspect of teamwork and camaraderie there. You learn about hard work, time management, nutrition and exercise in order to stay healthy. You learn about being able to commit to something. And these are all values that even if you're not sure that you want to go and try to excel to the highest level, it's an experience that you can take with you into other areas of your life. There are so many stories about people who got into college or got into a job because and they attribute it to the skills that they learned from their sport. And I've heard a lot of that in skating. A lot of people that have gone to medical school or law school, and part of the reason that they get in is because they're able to write something about their experience skating, or just because the qualities that they have that they took from skating transferred over to things that showed up in school or on their applications. I would say that my own experience skating, and also I've done years of committee work for our national governing body in skating, and so the communication skills I've learned there, and the work ethic skills I learned from skating, and also the ability to handle things under pressure that I've learned from skating, I think have helped me a lot in my professional career. I think if you want, first of all, if you are entering a sport and you have a goal of trying to be the best in the world, I think that's a great goal. I think that you should work really hard and apply yourself and make sure you enjoy the process. And I would also say, even if you're not sure that you want to be the best in the world, or even if you never make it to that level where you're trying to be the best in the world, that there's still so much good that you can get out of involvement in this sport that it's really worthwhile.
What advice would you give those future people and even people looking to represent the Team USA figure skating?
I would say that you need to be prepared to work hard. You also need to be prepared to, I'll put it in a way, not be given the benefit of the doubt. I mean, we're a sport that is judged by people. And so in recent years, we've tried to make it a little more objective. It was always kind of a very subjective type of sport, just due to the fact that when humans judge you, they're not computers, they're not completely perfect, that there's going to be some variation. A lot of what the United States experienced in the past, in the 1980s, 1990s, the United States was a very dominant country in roller skating, artistic roller skating. And since then, there have been so many other countries that have come up. Italy's particularly dominant, but you have Spain and Portugal and countries in South America, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, just to name a few. There's some great skaters from Paraguay. If I start naming them, I'll leave some out. But essentially, where it used to be a sport that was primarily dominated by one or two countries, because even about a decade ago, generally Italy was dominant in almost everything. Now it's a sport where good skaters can come from any country. And so on the one hand, it's good because it means that if you work very hard and you present a good product out in competition, you have a chance at success no matter where you're from. On the other hand, it means that just because you're successful within your country, in this case within the United States, just because you're successful here doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful at the world level. So you have to work hard and understand that there are a lot of good skaters out there. I would say don't get caught up in perfectionism, but definitely don't ever settle. Don't rest on your laurels. Don't think, oh, that's good enough. You should always be trying to get better. And that's how the whole sport gets better. In fact, everybody trying to push beyond what's currently good.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
So my as far as roller skating related content goes, I post most of that on my Instagram, and the handle is sweetbanana909. You could find me there. I would say for skating related content, that's the best place to find me. My other social media doesn't really deal as much with skating, so I would go there. I post photos and sometimes videos, and also promote other skaters sometimes. Like when I've been promoting, we had the skaters from my state that I grew up with, that they're competing at the World Cup final. I've been posting the links and the schedule to watch them skate. So for skating related content, follow me on Instagram, sweetbanana909.
Thank you again, Jessica Gaudy, for your interview, and best of luck in your future in the sport of figure skating.
Thank you.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Jessica Gaudy, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.